We'll start with a great email I got from a SI reader, Paul, about Derek Carr retiring on Saturday. Nice of Derek to do that on the weekend, making sure we had to clock a few hours on a beautiful Saturday right before Mother's Day. Wives always love that stuff. And I will say this. The question from Paul was, do we think the Saints are basically doomed at this point? And with the sub question of, is this a part of a larger play here for Derek Carr to just airlift himself out of New Orleans? And I paraphrase that, but thank you for writing in on that, Paul. What is your sense of what's happening here with Derek Carr, Albert?
I think it's complicated as hell. And I think if you want to go through it, like it really, I think, starts at the end of the season. Derek Carr is going through another coaching change. And, this was going to be, would this be 4 coordinators in 4 years, something like that? I mean, if you count the head coaches, you go, what would it be, John Gruden, then Rich Bisaccia in 21, because that was more than just like an interim situation. You know what I mean? Then Josh McDaniels in 22, then Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce, Josh McDaniels in 22, then Dennis Allen in 23 and 24. And there are coordinators associated with those. A coordinator change after 1 year in New Orleans. So, I think Kellen Moore coming in had an effect. And are they fully behind me? And then what do you want? Like, do you want something to show that they're behind you in the form of a contract adjustment? And he finds out that's not coming. And then the idea of a trade was definitely out there in NFL circles ahead of the beginning of the league year. Then the Saints convert him, which is basically saying, no, we're not trading you. Because once you convert him, and there wasn't really a deadline on them doing that, but they pay the $10 million roster bonus and then convert his base salary into a second signing bonus, which essentially, for those who don't know, I think the easiest way to explain that is like they're just paying you. They may not be giving you the cash, but that money is gone. You have paid that money for the year. So now they've paid Derek Carr for 2025, which I think may have been taken by him a little bit as like, okay, like you're going to do it our way. And then the injury comes up, and there's even some question about that because it's an injury that was initially suffered in 2023. And most quarterbacks of his age have, shoulders that could eventually need surgery. So it's complicated by all of that stuff. And, I think the conclusion, the fact that the Saints were willing to eat the $10 million roster bonus, and that, Carr was willing to walk away from the $30 million for now, at least is a sign that they were able to work together on some of this. But it certainly doesn't feel to me like a completely clean exit. Like, I think it was an amicable ending to the story. But whether this remains an ending at all, I think is still open for interpretation.
Yeah. I don't know. In your best estimation, let's say we're 6 months down the road here, or 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road. Is Derek Carr still retired during this NFL season, or do you think that Derek Carr is, I don't know, the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I don't know. I mean, I think, we've run into this with Kirk Cousins too, this offseason, where it's like, oh, well, they'll just wait for an injury, when it gets to August, or like, how often does that actually happen?
It doesn't. I mean, the Sam Bradford one is the gold standard that I think everybody is holding out for and trying to imagine that you can manufacture a first-round pick out of clean air, and you can't.
Yeah, and there was the year that that Ryan Tannehill tore his ACL and Jay Cutler came in and played for the Dolphins, which I believe was his last year in the NFL. So it's not unprecedented, but it's not that common either, especially with like what training camp is now. Like you see guys go down, it's less common now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other end of it too is like, where's the player at? Is the player willing to come out of retirement if that happens in October or November? Are you past the trade deadline? That's the question, right? Like, there's just so many things that would have to happen for another job to come available, and then for Derek Carr to be the target for whoever that other team is to come and get. And without even considering there could be competition, because, Kirk Cousins, and we'll see whether or not, anything happens there between now and the beginning of September. But like, certainly I think, the presence of Kirk Cousins would, throw another wrench in this whole thing where, Carr wouldn't be the only obvious answer for a team that's out there.
My thought on this is, and I saw some Saints fans freaking out about the idea that, well, aren't we so upset now that we don't have Shadur Sanders? And my answer is
He
probably
drafted
not.
Tyler Shuck over him. Like, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
sort
I
of
mean,
it, like,
yeah, you made a call there. And they were about equal footing. Like if you were to take like probably like an average of everybody's draft boards, right? I
yep,
would guess that Tyler Shuck was probably a little bit higher than Shadur
yep.
Sanders, generally speaking, and then everything
Mhm.
that came with Shadur knocked him down. I mean, this is something that we've talked about ad nauseum.
Yeah,
I don't
again, I
understand,
mean, one line for those who haven't listened. The simple way to put it: Shador falls out of the first 50 picks because of talent and performance,
talent.
and
Yeah,
then the rest was really about everything else for
right,
sure.
for sure. And
And by
so,
the way, Shuck went inside the top 50 picks,
right.
so it's sort of is what it is.
But I think that this is the best thing that could possibly have happened to the Saints, where
Yeah,
Derek
I kind of
Carr
agree with that.
Derek Carr is pulling the rug out from under you a little bit for sure. But the fact that it happened now, and the fact that you have to decide between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck as your week one starter, I think this is,
Disrespecting Jake Hainer now.
and Jake Hainer. Yep, forgot
Yeah,
about Jake Hainer. Sorry, Jake Hainer. But the reason why I think this is such a good thing is, and this is going to sound disrespectful to Shuck and Rattler, and I'm definitely a rattlehead. I'm definitely a rattlesnake. Love me some Spencer Rattler, but this team needs to suck for 1 year, and
yeah.
it's not like a tanking thing. Let me ask you something. When was the last time the Saints? I looked this up. When was the last time the Saints had a top 3 pick, Albert? Top 3.
Reggie Bush.
2006.
Yeah,
And they took a running back, which,
yeah.
like, so I'm
I'm
just
glad I
saying,
nailed that one. That could have been embarrassing.
no, well, this is not, this is an aside, but like, this isn't the 80s and the 90s anymore, where I feel like you don't prove your medal by your knowledge of sports trivia. That's not like impressive anymore because we can
Yeah.
just Google everything and look it up. It used to be that way, where I remember kids being like, I can name Edgar Martinez's batting average. And you were like, whoa, but now who
That's
gives a
still
shit?
like a device for me to go to sleep. Sometimes is to like try to like name the 59 Super Bowl winners in my head in order. Like
Really?
it's still a device. I still use like I like name every starting quarter. Like I don't know if you ever like if I have trouble sleeping, and because of my age, I do have trouble sleeping sometimes. Like that's actually a device I use. I use sports trivia as a device to try to fall asleep.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try that. I always do. I'm a big fan of trying to remember the exact words to songs and just
There you go.
and like listing them out like poems. I don't
Mhm.
know. We all have a different. None of us sleep anyway. I have a 3-month-old. I'm not. I
Yeah.
don't sleep. This is it's just continuous daylight. But this team has been middle of the road, the definition of middle of the road by
Yep.
NFL standards since 2020, since Sean Payton left. And I think about this. If you look at New Orleans' offensive line, and let's say Kellen Moore comes from Philadelphia, where he saw the way that Jeff Stoutland can absolutely transform a team into a powerhouse. And obviously, Jeff Stoutland
Yeah.
is not coming with him, but let's look at the Saints offensive line from left to right, and then I'll make my point. You have Fuaga, who was your first round pick in 2014.
Yep.
Probably playing inside him is going to be Kelvin Banks. He's a guard tackle. He was your first round pick in 2015. Then you have Eric McCoy, who was your second round pick in 2019. And McCoy may have been the best center in the NFL last year.
Yep.
You have Cesar Ruiz, who was your first round pick in 2020, had his best year probably last year.
Yep.
And then you have Trevor Penning, who was a first round pick in 2019.
So I think it's more likely, just my opinion. I think Banks and Fuaga are going to be the tackles.
You think so? And you're going to move.
I think Penning's going to be a swing tackle.
You think Penning's going to be a swing tackle? Okay.
Yeah, I think Penning. I don't know if the new staff use him as the starter. If
Okay.
then now that's assuming that Banks is going to come in and live up to what they expect. But
Right.
I would think like the more likely scenario is that Penning is either the swing tackle or competing to play inside with Dylan Reduns, who came over from Tennessee.
That's right. They have him too.
Nick Salvadori. Yeah, I'm cheating, by the way. I do have the depth chart up. Um, but I do think that Penning's going to be. I think Penning will be like in that mix, and I think Fuaga and Banks will wind up being the tackles. Because like to me, like that's the Kellen Moore thing. It's like the influence of being in Philly. Like they loved Mikael Williams, who went to the Niners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but Banks becoming available for them was too much to pass up, and I think a huge reason why is because of what Kellen Moore had in Philadelphia, and seeing the power of having two elite tackles the way that they did with the Eagles.
I mean, but don't you think a little bit too? I mean, Ruiz is good, McCoy is good.
Yep.
If Banks is good, and if Fuaga becomes something, and I know a lot of guys liked Fuaga, don't you think that this offensive line is
Could be one
kind
of
of
the
a
best lines in
sleeping
the league.
giant?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, I mean, there's a lot of ifs here, but so this
But
is
the
why
big picture thing is you're right. Like the big picture thing here is that this is a team that's been kind of waiting for a reset for a long time, and this gives them a pretty
Derek Carr hands it to them on a silver platter,
an organic opportunity to do it, right? Like an
and then if
organic
you're
opportunity
bad,
to go
you
through with it. And like, so like, what does that mean? Well, like that means you're starting to look at like the younger players on your roster and coming to grips with the fact that some of these guys, like your Demario Davises, your Tyrann Matthews, who've given a ton to the franchise, are probably on the way out.
Yep.
And you're going to start to build behind that offensive line. And again, like you look at the defense, they've got some pieces like Brian Brzee and, Pete Warner is a little older now, but still a really good player. What can Kool-Aid McKinstry be? Like, I think you're looking at some of those younger players and maybe investing a little bit more deeply in it. What do you do with Chris Olave? Like, are you going to pay him? If you don't pay him, do you look at draft picks there? Like, I think these are the big picture questions you have to start to ask yourself, like, and I think just like looking at the totality of it, like my goal if I were them would be to come out of this year and go into 2026 with a lot of guys, a lot of bedrock players, guys like Banks and Fuaga who are on their rookie deals. So maybe next year you try to clean out all the cap debt that you've built up, and then maybe you've got a rookie quarterback on the roster next year. Maybe his last name is Manning. And like and I don't think Manning's coming out, so I'm not going back on that.
right.
But maybe they're in position to draft a quarterback next year, in which case, like next year, then they take on the cap debt the way the Bills did when Josh Allen was a rookie. And now they're clean going forward in a spot to take advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie contract.
Not surprising.
If Shuck doesn't work out, which maybe Shuck kills it, we'll see.
Right. And maybe Shuck does work out, but I think and I have an arch thought, which is not going to surprise you in a second, but you're right. Like we look at Chicago and maybe Chicago has a good year this year. We look at Kansas City and Mahomes, and we look at the real blueprint, which is, you sit him, you don't sit him, whatever. It's just that the team has to be good, or at least somewhat good before the player gets there, and that makes it greases the skids. Drake May is the only quarterback I can remember over the last 3 or 4 years that has performed that well on a total garbage float of a roster,
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of these deals where it's win-win. Now, if you're Kellen Moore, do you think it's win-win? Probably not,
Yeah.
But that's something that he's got to work through. That's something he's got to deal with. As far as Arch Manning goes, because that was the other name that I saw. Everyone was like, well, we should have drafted Shadur Sanders. And then the second half of the Saints fan base, I thought, was like, Arch, here we come. And it's interesting because everyone puts the pieces together, which I have too, up until right now. And this kind of just came to me. But Arch and grandfather Archie both played there, and they live in New Orleans. And what a nice little tidy bow this would be if the Saints got the number 1 pick and you wrap everything together. But what is kind of interesting about the Manning family is that every player, every kid has gotten the chance to really carve his own path, right?
Yep.
I mean, I guess Archie went to Ole Miss and Eli went to Ole Miss, but
No, I mean, I wrote this last week, Connor, and I think like to me, like the family history, if you want to pay attention to the family history is that they don't rush things, that they don't,
Yeah.
and that they don't. And I think like Cooper, who for those who don't know is Eli and Peyton's older brother, who is Arch's dad. Like they've really prioritized giving him as normal a childhood as he could possibly have, which was, borderline impossible for a quarterback with that last name, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you look at it, like we may have, I can't remember. I remember saying this a few places last week. I can't remember if I said it on the podcast, but the kid had to create a Twitter account to announce his commitment to Texas. Think about that. Like he did not, like he's a high school kid in this era. And like the way that all these kids are out there posting their highlights, he had to create a social media account to announce where he was going to college. Like that's how dialed back they've been about having his name out there. And so you add that on top of the fact that Peyton Manning in 1997 could have been the number one overall pick in the draft and gone to the Jets and went back for another year at Tennessee. Eli could have been a first round pick in 2003 and went back to Ole Miss for another year. They both exhausted their college eligibility. I'm not saying Arch is going to do that because he would have to stay another 3 years to do that. Like, so he would actually then be in the 28 draft. But this idea that he is going to be, 13, 14, 15 starts and out of there doesn't match up with anything we know about the family, especially when you add it to the fact that like there's this threshold out there statistically that quarterbacks that have fewer than 25 starts in college don't have near as good a track record as guys who have more reps. So it's just none of it makes sense. And we're not even talking about the fact we don't know how good a quarterback he is yet, which is something to be considered.
Yeah, there's
and that's not an insult to him. We just don't know,
We don't know, but if he's decent plus at Texas, he's going number one. I mean, teams would salivate over that potential and they would the lineage and they would probably I mean, do you want to be the guy who doesn't take, let's say it's Arch and some other guy, whoever it is 2 years from now, right? And it's almost like Peyton and Ryan Leaf again, right? Like, do you want to make that, how are you going to, do you want to be that guy,
What if it was Arch versus Garrett Nussmeier, and the Saints had the number one pick? Because Garrett Nussmeier's dad is the offensive coordinator of the Saints.
That would be funny.
There you go. No, I think if we're being fair to the kid too, right? Here's what we know. He is in an era where you see fewer quarterbacks that are built the way quarterbacks are like prototypically built. He has that build. Mm-hmm. We can see he's an athlete. We can see he can really run. Like he's probably more like his grandfather than either of his uncles that way. And we know he's got good enough arm strength. What we don't know is like, and I think, what I think happens here, Connor, not to get into this big Arch discussion, but I had this talk with a few people who've actually been on the ground and seen him practice at Texas and all that, like scouts that go in during the week and have done all the work. And I think it's this assumption that, oh my God, he's got the size and he's a great athlete. And there's an assumption that he's going to have everything that Peyton and Eli had without like an acknowledgement of how hard that is to have all of that. You know what I mean? Like that's the part that like we don't know yet. And maybe he will have it, but I don't know how anybody could know without having seen a defensive coordinator having 8 games of tape to look at against elite opponents and then attacking him with that, right? Like he beat a directional school and Mississippi State last year. This is 2 starts in college. Mississippi State was 0-8 in the SEC. That's all the evidence we have. So again, like he might wind up being the best prospect of the last 10 years. He's got physical ability. There's no question about it. But I don't know how anybody could know yet what this is going to look like in a year or two.
Albert's Ohio State group chat privately, it's just full of guys being like, yeah, you want some Arts, wait until the playoffs. Yeah. Like, you can't wait. You're going to love it. Like secretly, like if Ohio State, if Ohio State blanks this kid like 49-0 in the first round of the playoffs, your shirt's going to be off.
No. You don't have to wait for that. They play.
What do you mean?
They play in the opener.
Really?
Yeah. Texas at Ohio State's the opener.
I've never been so happy about a scheduling development in my entire life. This is going to be amazing. The arts content is going to be out of control in this podcast. Oh,
It's going to be a big
oh,
week.